crystal clear. The US presses South Korea to reconsider its decision to terminate its intel sharing pact with Japan. It says three-way cooperation is essential to cope with threats facing the region. Tense talks ahead. Foreign ministry officials of South Korea and Japan are due to meet in Seoul. It will be their first meeting since Tokyo pulled Seoul from its whitelist of trusted trading partners. Plus, what you can do, we can do better. From Saturday, even more US tariffs are going to rain down on Chinese goods. Washington says it follows China's move to hike tariffs on American goods and threaten additional retaliation. So let's start this morning at South Korea's top office. President Moon Jae-in is holding a cabinet meeting as we speak to review next year's budget plan. The planned $423 billion budget would be South Korea's largest in history. The president is likely to reiterate his firm resolve to fight Japan's unreasonable trade restrictions against South Korea, as part of the budget plan includes ways to cope with the harsher trade conditions facing the country. He may also remark on Seoul's decision to end its military intel sharing agreement with Japan. The cabinet meeting, normally held every Tuesday, had been scheduled for Thursday this week. The government will submit its finalized budget plan to the National Assembly for review next Tuesday. Now, Washington's top defense officials have expressed their discontent over Seoul's decision to withdraw from GSOMIA, its intelligence sharing pact with Japan, amid intensified trade and history-related tensions between the two neighbors. They urged South Korea to renew the agreement while highlighting the importance of dialogue between all three sides. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has expressed his disappointment over the diplomatic row between South Korea and Japan that recently prompted Seoul to terminate an intelligence sharing pact with its Asian neighbor. Speaking at the Pentagon on Wednesday, Esper said he hopes to see Seoul and Tokyo resolve their differences. He also pointed out there are common threats, namely North Korea and China, and cooperation makes the alliance stronger. Speaking at a different event on the same day, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense Randall Shriver called on Seoul to recommit to the General Security of Military Information Agreement and renew the deal. He also explained that the U.S. has repeatedly made clear to the South Korean government that pulling out would negatively affect not only Seoul's bilateral ties with Tokyo, but also Washington's security interests and those of other allies. Shriver repeatedly stressed that Seoul and Tokyo should participate in meaningful dialogue to address their differences. Last week, South Korea announced its intent to withdraw from the intelligence sharing agreement that expires in late November, based on grounds that Tokyo refused to engage in separate talks on resolving trade and historical disputes. Meanwhile, South Korea's ambassador to Washington, Cho Yoon-jae, has reaffirmed the government's stance to maintain the robust Seoul-Washington alliance. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday, Cho said Washington's expression of regret over Seoul's decision is understandable, but stressed it was reached after deep and careful consideration. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, Seoul's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has called in the US ambassador to South Korea and asked Washington not to express concerns over Seoul's decision to pull out of GSOMIA, otherwise known as the General Security of Military Information Agreement it signed in 2016 with Japan. First Vice Foreign Minister Jo Se-yong sat down with US Ambassador Harry Harris on Wednesday to deliver Seoul's complaint. The ministry said Jo emphasized the decision had nothing to do with the bilateral security alliance between South Korea and the United States. While it's rare for South Korea to make public complaints to the US ambassador, the move comes at a time when Washington, as we just heard in the previous report, has repeatedly expressed a sense of regret over Seoul's decision. And foreign ministry officials of South Korea and Japan meet in Seoul today for the first time since Tokyo removed Seoul from its whitelist of trusted trading partners. Japan's Kenji Kanasugi is due in Seoul to meet with his South Korean counterpart, the Foreign Ministry's Director General for Asian and Pacific Affairs, Kim Jong-han. They are expected to discuss pending issues between the two neighbours, including Japan's trade curbs on Seoul. While this is a regular meeting both sides have once every few months, it comes, of course, at a very critical time. The diplomats will have a closed-door luncheon, followed by some talks. Kanasugi, the Japanese official, will also meet with his other South Korean counterpart, this time on nuclear negotiations, Lee Do-hoon. Now, North Korea's 14th Supreme People's Assembly, the regime's rubber-stamped parliament, gathers in Pyongyang today for the second time this year. As it's quite rare to see the North hold the parliamentary session twice in a single year, there really is a swell of interest among experts over what the North's leadership will discuss and, perhaps more importantly, announce. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Geunhye with more.
North Korea's parliament, the Supreme People's Assembly, is gathering for the second time this year on Thursday. The assembly usually gathers once a year in April, and it's rare for the meeting to be held 2 times a year. During the past 10 years, the North convened its parliament twice within 12 months, in 2010, 2012, and 2014. Seoul's Unification Ministry says that the North would evaluate projects it's been working on and set up plans.
In previous Supreme People's Assembly meetings, the North revised lower statutes of its constitution and made personnel reshuffles. It also assessed progress on its 5-year economic development plan and discussed future policy directions.
The timing of this rare second annual meeting draws attention. Although North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump agreed to resume denuclearization talks in July, and Kim later reconfirmed that through a letter to Trump earlier this month, there are still no signs of working-level negotiations between the two sides. In the meantime, Pyongyang fired over a dozen of projectiles into the East Sea and lashed out at Seoul and Washington for their military drills. Eyes fall on whether Kim Jong-un will make a speech at the parliament to clarify his stance, just like he did at the session in April.
At the last Supreme People's Assembly, the North sent out a message about its relations with the U.S., considering that we are keeping a close eye on the upcoming meeting.
In April's session, the North re-elected Kim Jong-un as the chairman of the State Affairs Commission and officialized him as the ceremonial leader of the state as well. The North also modified its constitution and made reshuffles in its power structure. At Thursday's meeting, watchers say there could be some additional reshuffles in Kim's cabinet and new legislations to follow through the 5-year economic development plan due next year. Oh Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea appears to be building a new ballistic missile-capable submarine and may be making preparations to actually test a missile. Analysing satellite photos of Sinpo South Shipyard taken on Monday, Joseph Bermudez and Victor Cha of Beyond Parallel, a research project funded by the US-based Center for Strategic and International Studies, confirmed reports by North Korean state media of a newly built submarine. Now, these photos show support vessels and a crane that could be deployed to tow a barge out to sea for a submarine launch test. However, the analyst said it's unclear when or even if a test could happen, citing a lack of conclusive evidence right now. Now, South Korea's Supreme Court is set to deliver its final verdict in the massive corruption scandal involving former President Park Geun-hye, her confidant Choi Sun-sil, and Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong. The verdict is due at 2 p.m. Korea time on Thursday, so just under 4 hours from now. It comes 28 months after the former president was charged for conspiring with Chair to force conglomerates, including Samsung Group, to make donations to build two shadowy foundations under Chair's control. A lower court sentenced Park and Chair to 25 years and 20 years in prison, respectively. The rulings will be broadcast live nationwide based on grounds that it's in the public's interest. Now, yet more concerning data has been released about South Korea's total fertility rate. The rate, which is defined as the number of babies that would be born to each woman if she were to live to the end of her childbearing years, slumped to yet another record low last year. In fact, it's now below 1 child per woman. Kim Hye-sung has more on these numbers that really don't bode well at all for South Korea's future.
South Korea's total fertility rate fell to 0.98 in 2018. With a rate of 1.17 in 2016, it was already the lowest in the OECD. Now it is the only country in the OECD that has a total fertility rate below 1, much lower than the OECD average of 1.68. Statistics Korea attributed the decline in childbirths to the falling number of marriages and the falling number of women aged between 30 and 34, which dropped 5% on year in 2018. Another reason for fewer babies is that more people are starting their families later, which raises the age at which women give birth. The average age that Korean women gave birth in 2018 was 32.8 years, 2 years older than the average age a decade ago. According to Statistics Korea, more babies were born to mothers in their late 30s than those in their late 20s. After hitting 4.5 in 1971, Korea's total fertility rate has been in continuous decline. The number of babies born last year fell near 9% on year to around 327,000, following declines of 12% and 7% in the 2 previous years. The falling fertility rate comes despite the Korean government's efforts to tackle the problem by spending over $80 billion over the last decade to try to increase the fertility rate, including subsidized childcare leave, free nurseries, and cash stipends.
The lower fertility rate hurts potential economic growth as production and consumption falls. It also has a negative effect on employment and could lead to a pension shortfall problem. Raising the overall quality of life and improving the work-life balance is ultimately the key to stopping the fall in fertility rate.
A fertility rate of 2.1 is considered the replacement rate that is needed to keep the country's population level stable at around 50 million people. But according to Statistics Korea, the fertility rate is expected to continue to fall through 2021. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Now to some good news. South Korea's Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries has released 14 endangered sea turtles back into the ocean from the nation's southern resort island of Jeju. Of them, 4 turtles were rescued, 3 were hatched artificially, and the rest came from abroad for research. So they're starting their new life now. Wednesday's event was joined by nearly 100 people, including the minister, representatives of related organizations and citizens. The move comes amid enhanced international awareness of the need to preserve sea turtles like this. Unfortunately, they are on the verge of extinction. Now, Brexit is back in the headlines in a big way. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced the suspension of UK Parliament, and it's going to run all the way through to October 14th. And that's just over 2 weeks before Britain is set to leave the European Union, and sharply raises the possibility of a no-deal Brexit. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Kim Dami. So Dami, tell us more.
Right, Mark. Johnson said Wednesday he would schedule the Queen's speech for October 14th to launch new legislation. During a televised interview, he insisted the decision was made to push his domestic agenda, including improving the National Health Service and fighting violent crime. However, it's widely seen as an attempt to block members of parliament, especially those from the opposition, but even some from within his Conservative Party, from delaying the UK's EU departure with no deal. In response, Johnson argued there will be enough time to debate the EU, Brexit, and all the other issues. The Queen accepted the request, so UK Parliament will be shut down from September 12 to October 14 and takes Britain close to the edge of crashing out of the EU on Halloween. The U.S. Trade Agency has reaffirmed President Trump's plans to impose hefty additional tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese imports, with the first wave coming into force on Saturday. This means the U.S. will be collecting a 15% tariff on Chinese goods, and the new import taxes will mostly target electronic goods. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative has reaffirmed President Trump's plans to impose an additional 5% tariff on a list of $300 billion worth of Chinese imports starting on September 1st and December 15th. In an official notice Wednesday, the USTR said it will begin collecting 15% tariffs on a list that contains $125 billion of goods from China, including smartwatches, Bluetooth headphones, and flat-panel TVs in the first phase of the tariff hike. The Federal Register filing indicated a 15% tariff will be levied on the remainder of the list on December 15th, which includes cell phones, laptop computers, toys, and clothing. The announcement comes as the Trump administration had previously planned to impose a 10% tariff on the imports. However, Trump announced a 5% tariff increase last Friday via Twitter in response to China's retaliatory tariffs on $75 billion worth of American goods. The Federal Register did not mention Trump's intent to increase tariffs to 30% on a separate list of $250 billion worth of Chinese imports from October 1st, which is currently being taxed at 25%. According to a USTR spokesperson, that tariff hike will be detailed in a separate Federal Register notice. Watchers say the trade war between the world's two biggest economies has now reached a point where it threatens global growth. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif urged European leaders to comply with the 2015 Iran nuclear deal during his visits to France last week. His chief secretary said Wednesday Iran's top diplomat asked France to press the U.S. to lift sanctions against his country and for European countries to comply with the Obama-era nuclear deal that the Trump administration withdrew from last year. Zarif's frequent visits to France have sparked rumors Iran and France are discussing a possible U.S.-Iran summit. However, Iran flatly rejects that speculation, insisting Zarif was in Europe to negotiate with EU countries.
Time now for our Life and Info segment, where we focus on information that we do hope will be useful or enjoyable for your everyday life, whether you're in Korea or somewhere else around the world. Today, though, we're going to focus on culture-related news that's quite local. Today, to explain what's going on in South Korea in regards to culture, I'm happy to say we have our Won Jung-hwan joining me in the studio today. So, Jung-hwan, what do you have for us?
Today, I'm here in the studio to tell you about a well-known musical, which is currently on right here in Seoul, the musical Mamma Mia.
Okay.
So as many people know, it's a heart-touching story of a mother and a daughter featuring 22 hit songs of an internationally famous pop group, ABBA. And includes Dancing Queen and Honey Honey. The story centers around a 20-year-old girl named Sophie who lives with her mother, Donna, on a Greek island. Sophie has never known the identity of her father, but after discovering her mother's old diary, she finds out that she has 3 possible dads and decides to invite them all to her wedding.
I was waiting for you to actually sing those ABBA songs, but I guess I'll have to wait for another time. I haven't seen the musical myself. I'm not a huge fan of musicals, personally, but I've seen both the movies, which are just adaptations of the musical anyway. It's set on a Greek island with the 3 different dads and whatnot. I enjoyed both of them a lot. But why are we talking about such a well-known musical today? What's so special about this version?
Exactly. Besides introducing the musical to our viewers, I wanted to explain the current trend of Korea's musical industry. In fact, last week, Mamma Mia reached 2 million ticket sales, making it the fastest musical to reach that milestone in South Korea. The musical first premiered in 2004, so considering for more than 15 years, 2 million ticket sales sounds a bit small. But according to industry insiders, every 1 person watching a musical is equivalent to 10 people watching a movie, so it's actually quite a lot. Only a few musicals have surpassed 2 million ticket sales in Korea. The musical Cats, which was the #1 before, took some 23 years to reach that level. So you get the idea how well Mamma Mia is doing in the Korean market.
Not only that, but you have to pay a lot more money to go and watch a musical than you would do to go to the cinema anyway.
It is much more expensive. And if we look into the ticket sales closely, the recent trend indicates that ticket sales have uniquely been strong among people in their 40s and 50s, suggesting that those groups are opening their wallets for more cultural activities these days. According to country's largest online ticket sales website, audiences in their 40s have been constantly showing a growing number in the past few years, with the number reaching almost 30%. And the number is almost similar to people in their 20s and 30s who are known as the top consumers in the musical market.
Compared to the recent musicals, which some people our age don't understand, we're simply used to ABBA's music, which was played back in the 70s and 80s. That is why we feel very attached to this musical.
Besides ABBA's music, I was simply curious as the musical has been going on for so long in Korea. I was so excited that I even skipped my dinner.
Many people have tried to figure out the secret of Mamma Mia's success in Korea, but the answer is simple: love and joy. And that universal appeal, combined with the internationally acclaimed songs of ABBA, I think it's the secret for its long run.
Well, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who doesn't love a bit of ABBA every now and again, if they're at a party or something like that. So many hits that you can dance along with and hum along to, and pretty much everyone knows all the lyrics anyway.
Exactly.
So the audience go there and they can sing the songs while the musical's going.
They all stand up, they all sing along.
It sounds like a lot of fun. But finally, for people tuning in then, just to check, the musical is Mamma Mia, as we mentioned, and it's being performed at the LG Arts Center, which is near Gangnam Station, correct?
Yes.
And it runs through the 14th of September at that particular venue.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Google LG Arts Center Seoul if you want to get more info on that. Jongwan, thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate it. And I look forward to hearing your ABBA rendition a bit later on in the office. Now we're going to take a quick look at some of the other culture and sporting events that are taking place around this time of year across South Korea.
Good morning. Another wet day is in store. Jeju and southern coastal regions are being affected by a monsoonal front, and a heavy rain advisory is still in place on Jeju Island. And those of you on Jeju will need to take extra care as the island has already received nearly 400 millimeters of torrential showers for the last 4 days. And Jeju could see more than 100 more today. Seoul and most of the rest of the country will see 5 to 40 millimeters depending where you are. Southern coastal regions will see the rain letting up by the afternoon though, while capital area will receive somewhat heavy showers through late afternoon. Today's readings will be similar to a couple notches lower than yesterday, and daily highs will be ranging from 26 to 28 degrees Celsius, Seoul, Daejeon getting up to 28 degrees this afternoon. After today's rain, readings will drop a touch, but we will see a good amount of sunshine as for here in Seoul. But southern regions in Jeju will see frequent showers into September. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's where we're going to have to leave the news and weather for now. Do stay tuned to Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time. So until then, goodbye.
Pakdarje Pass is a hill that Koreans are familiar with from the song Going Over Pakdarje Pass in Tears. The original name of Pakdarje Pass is Ideungryong because it was a hill that connected Mount Cheondeungsan and Mount Jideungsan. When did the hill called Ideungryong start being called Pakdarje Pass? It is said that there is a tragic love story behind the name. At 453 meters above sea level, Pakdarje Pass is a hill located between Pongyang and Daegun. In the past, one had to pass through this hill in order to reach Hanyang. In the mid-Joseon period, a young scholar from Gyeongsang-do province named Park Geun-hye, who dreamed of passing the state exam, also had to pass through this hill. As he was passing through the hill, he met a young lady named Keunbong in a near